Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to share with you some brief reflections on a topic that is close to our heart and that we've spent the last 2 years inquiring into: good organizations. And we want to briefly touch on 3 questions that were prevalent in our inquiry. Firstly, what is good and what is a better future of work? Secondly, how can we operationalize goodness in our organizations based on a somewhat deeper understanding of organizational behavior and complexity? And finally, how can we transform existing organizations towards more goodness? And here our first step has to be to gain more clarity on where exactly we want to lead our organizations. What is this goodness? And it's not what is the future of work, which is clearly descriptive, but what should the future of work be? And there are so many ideas and proposals and leadership models scattered all across cyberspace that frankly, it has become quite hard to know what to believe in. So when Antoinette and I embarked on the inquiry to figure out what exactly makes such organizations good, one thing became immediately evident. Most of what's being proposed today as new remains entrenched in a highly instrumentalist paradigm. Concepts like agility and net zero and net positive, sustainability, ESG, SDG, you name it, they mostly center around doing less harm while essentially maintaining a status quo. But reducing bureaucracy, becoming more agile, or offsetting CO2 emissions isn't quite the same as doing good. Because doing good is about who we are and how to bring to life the best in ourselves at and through work.
But what does this mean for organizations? Our simple idea is that we need to re-embed our organizations as the vital link between a fulfilling life and a prosperous society. Organizations attain excellence by firstly enabling people to develop internally, while secondly contributing collectively to a good economy and society externally. And let's be clear, we are not arguing against making organizations more efficient, customer-centric or adaptive, but we do suggest to do it for a different purpose. Profit is not an end in itself, but must serve to enable social flourishing and justice on a larger scale. But of course, the second question is, how do we create organizations that bring to life such good? Most of you will have learned that culture change is rooted in those underlying assumptions and values below the surface. So maybe, as many popular management writers suggest, we only need to start with why. Insist on changing our mindset or simply becoming more conscious or teal or psychologically safe to transform.
Maybe, but unfortunately, it turns out that the fashionable iceberg model and everything that is based on it is as popular as it is simplistic. So it's time to upgrade our toolkit. Out with shine and his iceberg, and here comes complexity. And now, without diving too deep into the details, you will find all the references on our website. Let me share a point from the operational coalface. As it happens in complex business environments, when we dive beneath that surface, we very seldom find a neatly ordered set of shared values and assumptions that we can plug into some regression analysis or bake into some culture change program to create the future. Conversely, what we find is that the water is often pretty dark and murky, and we face dangerous sharks and treacherous currents. Or in a bit more technical speak, within complex social systems, we encounter 3 essential entities. There's people, culture, and social structures, and each come with their own unique powers. And their combined interactions generate mechanisms that might translate into certain constellations that we might detect above the waterline. So it's all a little bit more complex.
So again, what does this mean for organizations? It implies that it clearly takes more than new narratives, consciousness, or polished purpose statements to craft good organizations. Firstly, as we have seen, we must cultivate all those elements below the organizational surface, from the underlying cultural foundations like language, symbols, metrics, and policies, to the structural frameworks, routines, and systems. And of course, finally, also to the holistic development of individuals and communities.
And that's why we believe it requires a new model to look at organization. In our own work, we emphasize the intentional development of virtuous social practices, which we call micro-organizations, alongside the refinement of corporate institutions and governance, which we frame as the corporation. And of course, people. And here our focus indeed lies not just on competencies, but character, virtues, and wisdom. But it's also not just about each component, but about the connection between them. And truly human-centric organizations need to nurture a moral environment that combines care, integrity, and compassion with that genuine commitment towards mutual elevation for the greater good. And to do so, we must continue to evolve organizational design, seeking to strike a more progressive balance between local affordances within those micro-organizations, individual growth, and the need to foster a shared learning as well as a coherent external value proposition. And that's quite difficult. And we can see it in all our research that with growing scale, most corporations turn instrumentalist. And to counter this, we believe that we must overlay the existing dominant financial governance with disciplines for collective reflection and participation, essentially creating what could be called a living organizational constitution. For instance, at ING, we sponsored a so-called leadership council that had to collectively steer the ongoing transformation. And the ultimate goal here is to first connect people, structures, and culture, thus nurturing organizational wisdom, identity, and character, and then to enable something like a reflective equilibrium that continually actualizes the potential of the organization, given its particular circumstances, to create that social flourishing.
Or to put it more simply, we must learn to care and be intentional about our organization's moral climate, exactly like we have learned to care for the environmental climate. But how does all of this translate into action? Firstly, we must focus more on our people. This involves character-based selection and promotion, personalized development plans, and strict adherence to that famous no asshole rule. Secondly, we need to much more deliberately evolve management structures and practices to craft that reflective holding space for mutual growth and creativity. And thirdly, we must revise corporate governance structures and institutions, like success measures, reward and recognition policies, or team affordances, to embed virtuous principle and actively develop and foster positive impact. The key here is to evolve people and organizational practices holistically and at the same time across various levels, avoiding fragmentations between specializations.
And I think if we look at an organization, there's no doubt that we have many different levers to foster such positive transformation. We can influence the context within any specific functional discipline and also across the policies, structures, and success metrics of the broader organization. And you can see on the slide, we started to gather some ideas and also correlate them to different maturity levels, but we'd love to hear from you. If you're willing to share your thoughts and best practices or some good exemplars, just get in touch. And we will make all the consolidated outputs accessible at leadershipsociety.world. But going back to the original transformation model, there's always a but. And here from our experience, we've called it the transformation law number 1. It so happens that the maturity of an organization can never transcend the wisdom of its leaders. Therefore, whilst we're working on all these practices and across the different levels, we must also deliberately develop leadership. And there's a lot to do. A recent study by the CMI, the Chartered Management Institute, found that 52% of leaders lack basic professional qualifications, and over half of new leaders fail within the very first year. And maybe here, from leadership to organizational excellence, in our belief, excellence in business is never just about what we produce and certainly not simply about how much money we make, but ultimately it is about who we become. Our work is always also a mirror image of who we are, capable of creating boundless joy or bottomless sorrow. And therefore, colleagues and friends and leaders across all those organizations, what you do and how you develop your leadership in your organization and beyond matters.
We hope we have given you a good first glimpse at what it means to build good organizations. Many more references and resources are available on our website at leadershipsociety.world. And if you want to take away one closing thought from our session, remember, we are not good leaders because we rule. We are good leaders because we truly care. The future of work, it's already here. Let's not waste it.
Thank you very much.